I'm Shelley Irwin, host of the WGVU Morning Show right here in West Michigan. Thank you, as always, for being here. I am also a member of the World Affairs Council, and thank you all for joining us tonight. This is the last discussion in this 8-week series. Did we save the best for last? Oh, I didn't say that. We are discussing privacy in the digital age. No snow on the ground, that's an inside joke. And we have quite an interesting stage for the finale as well. As most of you are current members of the World Affairs Council through a general corporate or educational membership, thank you again for your support of the many programs. We encourage you to share information about the organization to your friends and family. Please sign up for a free email membership through our website, worldmichigan.org, and then know of the great programs that the World Affairs Council offers to the public. It is an award-winning council that's active all year long, but you know that already. Personally, as part of the WGVU team, I do want to take this moment to let you know what an honor WGVU has had by bringing the Great Decisions series sponsorship to you this year. We do believe in educating our community and are glad to partner with organizations like the World Affairs Council. We also want to thank Booking.com for its sponsorship of tonight's discussion. It is through these collaborations, as you know, living here in West Michigan, that we are able to bring quality programming to you. Oh, also tonight, we want to extend a special thank you to our educational partners. Each year, the World Affairs Council partners with many of the colleges and universities in West Michigan. They support the programs, particularly this Great Decisions program, and help guide it to be the best to both benefit the community and their educational institution. Tonight in our audience, we have Dr. Steve Enders, the president of GRCC. Steve, can you stand? We'd like to thank you for your support. Happy 100 years to university. Karen, you rock as well. Glad you're here. If you are interested in continuing the discussion after the program, the Expats and Cultural Explorers Meetup Group will be meeting immediately following the end of the program at Soul Garden. It's located across from Celebration Cinema Woodland Mall. All are welcome, no reservations necessary. Please join the discussion. It's a benefit of having an earlier program. Now on to our evening's topic. The idea of privacy has undergone significant changes in the digital age, as has the idea of privacy harm. Legislation, both at home and abroad, hasn't kept pace with technological developments, leaving some wondering if privacy, as we know, is it long dead? Well, tonight we are honored to learn of the topic, to have Arthi, that's Arthi, A-A-R-T-I, Shahani, tech reporter for the National Public Radio's Business Desk, join us to discuss the latest developments in regards to digital privacy and the implications of it as we move forward in this great 21st century. In her first year at NPR, Arthi has shed light on hidden stories, such as the role of cyberstalking in domestic abuse and the underground world of hackers. She's won numerous awards for her reporting. Before going to NPR as a Kroc Fellow, Arthi received a Master's of Public Policy from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and has a bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Arthi Shahani.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Hi. I have my laptop for notes because I basically don't use paper or know how to write with a pen anymore. I have my cell phone for more notes. I am not checking messages while I'm talking to you. And if you want to turn your ringer off, that would help to not distract me too. And as evidenced in my bio, I have no training in journalism or in technology, so I think I'm the perfect fit for my job, which is to explain to our audience and to look for the ways in which technology is changing our lives, transforming it. And I think that privacy and surveillance and security, I would add to that, are really core to how NPR is covering technology and wants to continue covering it. In contrast to other kinds of tech coverage, which could be a lot more, I would say, sort of what I call gadget porn. So what I'd like to start with is talking a little bit, just a very little bit, in fact, about Big Brother. And then I want to talk about something else. You know, there are concerns. One of my favorite writers is a man named Bruce Schneier, who's now actually at the Berkman Center at Harvard, and he's a cryptographer as well. And he talks about how you have the public sector and the private sector historically amassing different kinds of data. And so the government, for example, through the criminal justice system, would drill into the life of a person and get lots and lots and lots of information about that individual. And then big companies with big mailing lists that want to advertise, et cetera, have these large swaths of data with big cross-sections of people. And now we're seeing a convergence where because data is digital, it's possible for public and private entities to very easily share with each other and to amass much larger data sets that I would argue none of us have really figured out, or for the most part, we have not figured out how might these things be used. And so there's a bit of a huge question mark that I think has raised a lot of the concerns we have and the kinds of questions we ask. Well, is privacy dead? Well, we don't know even what parts of our privacy, need CPR. We don't know what parts are gone. We don't know what parts have been permanently amputated. We don't know what parts might be newly grown because it's actually possible to protect ourselves in new ways. I mean, this is all new. I would say that one thing I want to share in terms of the Big Brother concerns is from my reporting in Silicon Valley, because I'm based over there. While a native New Yorker, I now live in San Francisco. I'm very lucky that weather's there. I'm keeping my coat on because I'm actually cold here, even though I understand it's warm today. And one thing that strikes me that I'd like to share around the country is the kind of deep rift that has happened that may be happening, I shouldn't say that has happened, that may be happening between the public and the private sector. The Snowden Revelations did a lot, regardless of what you think of him. And by the way, Citizen 4 is an amazing documentary if you have not yet seen it. I mean, Laura Portress is just a master in frame. But Snowden Revelations did a lot to expose or to implicate different large tech companies in letting the NSA have backdoors, right, into their data to make it easy to come in or to actively share. And so companies like Apple and Yahoo and Facebook, all of these companies whose names you know because you have smartphones, right? Everyone in this room presumably has at least one, maybe even two. You know the names of these companies. They're not like the technology companies of the 60s and 70s that made little processors that you never bothered to look at. This is right in your face. And those revelations about the possible collaboration between the two really hurt the reputation of Silicon Valley, right? Not just in the US, but globally. You have to think about the companies, these American companies, as not just catering to you and me, but catering to the rest of the world as well, and trying to grow what we used to call the developing world is now emerging markets, right? And so that's where we're trying to get business. And so the tech companies now, I would say, and one thing I follow as a reporter is, how are they responding to Washington, D.C. and White House efforts to collaborate around digital security, which always has implications for privacy. And one thing I recently covered that fascinated me was President Obama had come to town. He did this big, it's almost like carnivalesque gathering at Stanford University. And it was supposed to be, the leader of the country a month after the Sony hack, coming and from Stanford, from Silicon Valley, telling America, we are all going to join hands, and we are, as the public and private sector, going to share information about what companies are being invaded and how. We're going to stockpile data so that we can do really good digital forensics to figure out how they're getting at you, how the hackers are getting at you, and protect your privacy. And we're going to do all of this by getting everyone to give their breach information, their data, or data about hacking, that is about sort of breaking into networks. We're going to get everyone to voluntarily give their information over to the Department of Homeland Security. And it was very notable, Obama never mentioned the NSA at all in that talk. We're going to give it to Homeland Security. It's a safe space. This was also, by the way, when they were still struggling for funding. We're going to give it to them, and we're going to secure America. Now, Silicon Valley's response was so interesting to me because the business leaders there, I mean, Tim Cook from Apple actually came on stage and was alongside Obama. So he was very vehemently like, yes, we're here together. But actually, there were a lot of business leaders who were not there, like the CEOs of other companies, like Marissa Mayer from Yahoo and Zuckerberg from Facebook. But they weren't there for a reason, which was that they're not sold on participating with the government. Or at least that's what they're saying now. And I have to admit that I don't know everything, obviously, what's happening behind the scenes. But they feel a public pressure that didn't exist before to say, why would we vocally agree to hand off information to the cousin of the NSA, right? And so what's interesting in terms of the sort of big, we have to make things simple. And so when we think about privacy and surveillance, there's the big brother sort of bucket of things that we talk about. And in that big brother bucket of things, what's clear is that the repercussions of mass surveillance in terms of politics and how it affects partnership is not clear. And then in terms of what's actually being amassed about our lives is not clear, right? And so I would say that that's a thing that we have to keep plugging away at. But I actually want to shift gears because there's the big brother stuff that I think in some ways it's also sexy to talk about, right? Like I think about where media is. You know, the media establishment is primarily an East Coast monster, right? Like we're a New York and DC thing. I say that as someone who now lives in San Francisco and has to be up by 6 a.m. at my computer to keep up at the latest. But apart from Big Brother, there's Little Brother, right? And I would say that those are the kinds of privacy and surveillance concerns that I'm frankly far more interested in at this point. And what I mean by Little Brother is the stuff that we're doing to track ourselves or the people that we know and why we're doing it. Some of it is completely voluntary, some of it is not voluntary, and the word voluntary is taking on new, very litigious meanings in this day and age. And so what I want to do is share two kinds of Little Brother stories I've reported for NPR, just to sort of open up a conversation and sort of hear, you know, for me, the benefit of coming to a place like this is I can just kind of see what resonates, what doesn't, and then I'll, you know, kill a story or take on a new one depending on the things that you tell me. But if we can just start, Mark, with playing the first cut of. Let me actually set it up. So this is a it's a possibly invasive question. Have any of you here used these fertility tracking apps? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. If I asked that, one take, there we go. If I asked that question in San Francisco, half the room's hand would have gone up. But fertility tracking apps, they're marketed as being a way that you basically monitor your ovulation and other things and your body temperature and different things to optimize the moment at which you're most likely to get pregnant. And so it's basically like a digital calendaring system. Some people use it for pregnancy prevention, like this is the time that I should never risk because I am very fertile. But these fertility tracking apps, they're also a bit of a science experiment for some people, because think about it this way. If couples or if women or if people are willing to log in information about the frequency of their sex life, about the things that they're doing, that could provide amazing crowdsourced data to scientists, whether computer scientists or biological scientists, who want to study that data. And so one person in Silicon Valley, one of the founders of PayPal, Max Levchin, he's a very celebrated entrepreneur, he came out with an app that's called Glo. And Glo is a fertility app, it's self-tracking, that asked it wasn't the first fertility app on the market, but it asked some really invasive questions like, was there a female orgasm? What was the position at the time of? Things that, you know, a lot of science has said that's not so pertinent to fertility, but Levchin just had to ask. He's like, we don't know. Maybe it is, or maybe it's pertinent to something else like marketing. And so if you can start with it at 157, the A cut.
Same one who helped start PayPal. Levchin says Glo is running a science experiment.
Part of our responsibility here is to actually gather enough data to run a study and say, you know what, people conceive faster if they tried it on their back or not.
Glo stores all its data on the cloud. Arguably, sexual position is more sensitive data than a credit card number, and this app does not strip people's names from their responses. Levchin says that's a service. If a Glo app user needs to visit a fertility doctor,
you actually want to show up with a log that that person can understand. They can look at and say, oh, you've been tracking your data. Let me tell you what your options are.
My goal when couples are early in the...
I just wanted you to get a sense of his voice. I mean, and it's a very provocative argument, right? That we as consumers, can use our power as consumers to be more active patients. We can track things about ourselves and then bring it over to our doctors and nurses so that they don't have to bother tracking it for us, or we can be empowered. I mean, it's a value proposition that it resonates with a lot of people. Like, yeah, I want to be empowered. I see a lot of shaking heads no over here as well. And there's also that part of it that's like, wow, you just don't know where this stuff is going to go. It's clearly in their servers, and where next? And this is a playful moment, if we play the B cut, of me kind of just wandering with Levchin a little bit. What could you do with this stuff that you're gathering?
You should talk to your doctor.
The Glo app is free. Founder Max Levchin says he's focused on getting new users. And Glo has a companion edition for the partner of the woman trying to conceive. Using data about her mood and ovulation, Glo makes suggestions like,
this might be an excellent time to send a bouquet of flowers or a spa trip or something like that.
Is this integrated with flowers.com or hotels.com?
Not yet, but since I am on Yelp's board, I know exactly where to look for the best florists and spas. And we actually talked about it early on when we were designing this thing.
That is kind of creepy.
That's the gut reaction of Andres Ornelas, the father-to-be from the baby store. Ornelas is a fan of self-tracking, but doesn't want an app that intrudes on his marriage.
If an app told me, oh, now it's that time of the month to buy flowers for your wife, then I feel like I'm not giving them the flowers. I feel the app is doing it for me.
But the guy who always forgets to buy flowers, he might like that feature.
Okay, there
Fertility.
And so, I play that cut because I think it's sort of, you've got one app. I mean, it turns out that Levchin's Glo had other issues with it that has made it not the most popular app in the iTunes store. But you have these kinds of things that are asking us very personal questions. They're free or they're 99 cents, and you just plug away at it. You don't know where it's going, but it's going somewhere that can be used at some point down the line, either extremely conveniently or in ways you really didn't want, right? That's one of the concerns that I hear, one of the very valid concerns I hear against about the digital medical records, right, electronic medical records. We heard recently about the Blue Cross and Premera hacks, right? And so we're at a point now where, I have, just by show of hands, how many people here have gotten that call that their credit card number or debit card was stolen? It's a sizable number, like what, a third, a half of the room? Okay. Any chance someone here has gotten the call about their health, like were they part of Blue Cross or Premera and get that call? Okay, so a couple of people in the room as well. I mean, what's scarier as we go along in this food chain is that credit card numbers, they're replaceable. It's an inconvenience, but it's 16 digits that can be replaced, right? When you start getting into hospital records, and that's really the industry, the security industry is anticipating that this will be the year of the healthcare record hack. Because hospital systems are so weak and it's such an obvious place to go and grab valuable information. What's scarier about that stuff in terms of our privacy and our, our credit and our identities, et cetera, is that we're getting into the land of data that's not so replaceable, and that really is about us, right? It's like, and again, there's this question of how will it be used? Credit cards, highly liquid. In the black market, it's very clear how they're used. If you go to certain underground sites, which I've done with experts, you see that there's a very vibrant and automated trade for credit card data. So as soon as there's a massive breach, you see it flush in the market. And you see sales going on like crazy, and it's just cash, cash, cash. With the medical records, that's not actually happening. And so it's possible that we also aren't clear on who's taking them. It's possible, and this is not me talking crazy sci-fi stuff, I'm just telling you what experts tell me who study this stuff pretty vigilantly. It's possible that there are organized crime groups that are amassing data on individual people for use later on for extortion purposes or for massive identity fraud, things like that. And when I say it's possible, it's not just that it's possible, it's likely, okay? And it's not so hard to do when everything's digital and you can grab it. So I think that there are a lot of aspects that we still don't really get in terms of the systems we're opting into, whether it feels like we are or aren't, in theory, we're opting into doing these things, and then things are going and taking on a life of their own. There's another aspect of privacy and surveillance and security that I think has been thoroughly underreported that I actually stumbled into one day. I happened to, for some reason, be talking with a domestic violence counselor. And she just said this throwaway line. She's like, oh yeah, cyber stalking. It's nuts. Cyber stalking's everywhere. And I was like, what, you mean like texting too much? I didn't get it. I'm like, what do you mean? You know, like, okay, texting, whatever, what's the big deal like that? But no, actually, what she meant is that through these things, lovers and exes are tracking, monitoring 24/7 at the bar, wherever, they're monitoring their partners, right? And so if we can just play, starting at the C cut, Mark. And so...
NPR's Arthi Shahane started looking into how these tools are used. She found that cyber stalking is now a standard part of domestic abuse in the United States.
Before we get into how spyware works, I want to bring you into a place that's been transformed by it.
It is important to let you know it is a confidential location. You're not to reveal the address to the shelter to anyone.
We're in a domestic violence shelter, a safe house for mostly women and children. It's run by a group called Next Door, and it's somewhere in the heart of Silicon Valley. I can't tell you exactly where because its location is a secret by law. I had to sign an agreement to be let in. While the kids are playing with dominoes in the living room, Counselor Rosa Navarro takes the newest arrival, a woman who has a little boy, into a quiet office for intake.
I do have to tell you that most cell phones nowadays have a tracking system. If your abuser were to...
I have everything off on mine. My GPS is off and my Wi-Fi too. Everything's off.
So what struck me just in that opening scene, and in the process of getting to report that opening scene, is that domestic, and we ended up calling about, I think it was 100 domestic violence shelters around the country, did a random sampling, and 85% said that that stalking by GPS is a problem so big that they've had to change all of their intake procedures to deal with it. As was illustrated by this caseworker basically saying to make sure, hey, is your GPS off and you're not allowed to use Facebook here because of the geolocation features of it. What struck me in that process of reporting was that when I went to that shelter, and it was quite a lot of work to be allowed to come into a shelter, is that the caseworkers were for the most part dealing with very visceral, immediate physical world things, okay? So like I spent my first half of the day in a hotline room where the kinds of conversations that were happening there was like, oh, so your grandfather raped your daughter. Where are you guys physically now? I mean, it was very like immediate physical safety kind of stuff, right? And because all of those issues are already so pervasive, it's kind of hard to pay attention to this other stuff, right? And so the world under their feet is changing quite rapidly, but it's hard to pay as much attention to it because you already had a pile of stuff going on that was so intense. And so one thing that concerns me, one thing I'm trying to look at more vigilantly as a reporter is how these digital tools are being used in these, I hate to call domestic violence mundane garden variety crime, but if you look at the data, it is, right? How it's being used in this way. And if you go over then to the D-cut for a moment.
Easily. I was surprised the woman was so cautious, so I asked her, I'm just curious why you knew to shut off all the things on your phone, the Wi-Fi and the GPS.
I know because a lot of my phone works for sheriff department.
Smartphones
Okay,
and
so
GPS.
Go ahead. So, I mean, in this case, it was this woman who most people don't know, according to the counselors that I was talking to, but this woman happened to know because she's related to a bunch of cops that were like, oh, yeah, you can do this. I see people doing that. And so they just kind of hear it from the family. But a lot of people don't hear it. And so I also heard of anecdotes around the country, for example, of a woman who was leaving her husband, and the husband said as a parting, and she was taking her children, hey, I just want to give my son an iPhone, let him have an iPhone. She's like, okay, fine, I'm not going to stop you from giving your son an iPhone. And then she crossed state lines, went to a different state, and then at the gas station she had gone to, and she didn't tell her husband that she was leaving the state. At the gas station she had gone to pump gas across state lines, her husband showed up because he used the Find My iPhone feature through his son, and then just started beating the crap out of her in the lot, right? And so these are the kinds of things that they're actually pretty common at this point, right? But my concern is that we really just haven't gotten a full handle on, the technology changes so quickly. It's not just lawmakers in Washington, D.C. and politicians that are slow and have to catch up. I think it's the rest of us, right? Like as users, as consumers that have to catch up and understand what's happening here. In case you're wondering about the technology behind what made this possible, is that there are a handful of apps that are called spyware, okay? So they have names like Moby Stealth and MSpy, and they're marketed as ways to track your children. Okay, how many of you have given your kids smartphones? Kids, in other words, kids under 14, let's say. Some people, okay, I don't see hands up, but okay. A lot of people do. And there's this argument that, hey, parents, and it's sort of, the proposition is parents need to follow what their kids are doing because digital life can be wild and crazy and all sorts of pedophiles can be talking to you or to your kids, and you need to make sure that they're safe. And so you have these tools that are marketed as, this is a legal way to follow your minor children, and that in reality are being used, pretty pervasively to monitor, fellow adults that arguably have a right to privacy. So if you can just play the e-cut. I had a sheriff walk me through how one of these apps work.
System.
Now, the stalker can monitor the person being stalked from the website of the spyware company. Detective Hill goes to his laptop and logs into his MSpy account. There's a really nice dashboard to organize all the information you're grabbing, and it's a lot of information, like
contacts, call logs, text messages, call recordings.
That's full recordings of entire conversations.
Photos, video files.
There's also a log of every website visited by the person being stalked, and a keylogger function to record everything the victim types into their smartphone.
So when you type in the website, it'll record www.wellsfargo.com.
And once you're there, what's the next thing you're going to type?
It's going to be your username and password.
Now the stalker can get...
Great. So that's the kind of thing that, again, it's pretty easy to use. It's like a subscription service, so it's like $99.99 a year. I'm not advertising for them, but it's, it's pretty cheap. And you get a lot of power that way. I mean, it's sort of like in the pre-digital days, the cost of doing these things was enormous, right? You have to sort of go out there yourself, get off your butt, sort of follow people around. You've got to hire a private eye. You've got to sort of dig into trash cans, all this kind of stuff. And so now the cost of surveillance, of spying, of stalking, of cyber stalking, or stalking has just radically declined. And so one thing that a domestic violence expert had explained to me that I found like a very powerful way to think about this in terms of our privacy is that ultimately what we're talking about is power, right? It's like who does have power and who doesn't have power. And in the domestic violence arena, what you're very dramatically seeing is that, I mean, DV has existed for forever, but now the ability to subvert the power relationship, to gain more power quickly has just grown a lot through this kind of medium. And so I would say that it's one way that privacy has really transformed in a way faster than we would have anticipated. Another thing that struck me in this context of cyber stalking is how hard it is for police and the courts to catch up. I mean, in our legal structure, it's not actually clear when is this illegal. Like if I gave someone permission to install an app on my phone without really understanding what it was going to be used for, or because I didn't feel like I could say no, is that legal or illegal? I mean, there's some real questions there, and it's not clear cut. And then the other thing is the so what factor. There's a story that I'm actually working on now that I can't tell you too much about, but at a very high level, it basically involves a woman who realized that she was being monitored by her ex 6 months after breakup. I mean, like talk about, breaking up is hard to do. 6 months out, and when she went to the police with the evidence of her stuff and said, I think he's like following me through this stuff. He knows all these things. The police basically said, go change your equipment, go get a new laptop, go get a new phone, move on. And so it's basically, the police saying, hey, just go throw out the evidence because we're dealing with homicide and we have all of 3 people here that actually know how to assess a smartphone, if that many, so we can't deal with this stuff. And so it's really interesting how, it begs the question of who becomes responsible for this? Like, what's the accountability chain for this? And I'd say even with the theft of data, there's a question about the accountability chain, right? It's sort of, if you find that you're the victim of, gross identity theft, who do you blame at the end of the day? Is it, the hacker ring that was just too powerful? Is it the network that failed to protect you in terms of the hospital carrier? Was it their subcontractor? I mean, all these questions, obviously, they're going to work themselves through courts in the coming years, but they're questions that are very, very clearly undefined by way of answer. And so, I think that's time by way of just sort of giving an overview on what I report on and some of the things I'm interested in, and then I can open it up to questions and discussion, and I probably have questions for you as well.
I'm going to repeat the number for questions. You can text them to my phone, or you can come down to the to the microphones. Can we put that PowerPoint back up with the number? Okay. Okay. Oh, they're already coming in. In light of the recent German plane crash, what rights does the public have to know personal information as it applies to public safety?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad I'm a reporter and not a policymaker. And, it's funny, I hadn't thought about it in the context of that plane crash. It's dangerous, right? It's like, I recall, who was it on CNN? But basically, as soon as that plane crash happened, there was this question of, was it a terrorist act? And I believe it was someone on CNN who had said, well, we don't know the religion yet of the pilot. And so, there is always the danger that the public knowing is not always the answer or the antidote to protecting our rights. I mean, I can recall actually after the situation of the horrible Boston Marathon bombing, there was a young man named Trupati, who is an Indian American man. And at some point, people, I believe on Reddit, were convinced that they saw his face and that he could have been one of the bombers. And so they took to the crowdsourcing platform, and then vigilante style showed up at the home of the family. And I happen to know this family also, just full disclosure, I went to graduate school with a sister. Showed up at the home of this family demanding the terrorist. And then it turns out he had nothing to do with it. And at the end, what happened was actually he was a mentally ill young man whose body turned up dead for other reasons. And so, as a citizen, I'd be wary that the public knowing everything is a good thing, because we all have our biases. I mean, that's why we have leaders for a reason too. Hopefully, people that we can trust to help us in certain ways. Yeah. But that's just a thought. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good question.
Hi. So in all the stories that you've done and all the information that you've uncovered, how has that changed how you have interacted with your smartphone or technology, for example?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I feel completely exposed now. Remarkably little. And so I would say that the only thing that's really, what are the things that have changed in my digital diet? I have a password manager. Do you know what that is? Okay, so I use this thing called LastPass. Again, this is not a commercial. This is not a promo. I'm not endorsed or backed by LastPass. And there are many others out there. But it's basically these, there are these password managers where instead of, making your password 5 letters that are easy to remember that actually form a word, they just give you these 26 or 52 characters or whatever. It's just craziness. But then they also have a system to automatically input into the places that you're going to log in. But because the passwords are then being kept in their vault, which is more secure than your brain for it's more secure, basically the likelihood of your stuff getting stolen reduces. So I feel like the password manager is probably the most proactive step I've taken to protect myself. And then besides that, I do sometimes, I don't have it today because I was Skyping earlier, I do sometimes keep the camera on my MacBook covered, the camera on it, because I am afraid of hacking there, so it's for the most part covered, which I guess is fine to be a public fact. And besides that, I guess I keep GPS off on my phone for the most part, except when I need to use it to map, which is unfortunately too often because I don't have an internal compass. And it's interesting that you asked us now. There's something that happened the other day. One of my colleagues was going to go speak at somebody else's campus, and so I hit on his Twitter thing because I was curious where he was going to speak, and then a little ad popped up also, and the ad said, "Is he cheating on you? Spokio can tell." And I was like, and actually, that's where the algorithms failed because I'm not in a situation where that would happen, but I was like, that's interesting. Something about my consumption is indicating that this is a concern for me. And then I click on the ad, which now, unfortunately, is a curiosity. I clicked on it, and now I'm getting a lot of these ads. But it's basically like, type in the email address of the person that you're interested in finding out about, and they're going to tell you, they're going to pull out, for money, they're going to pull out, all the social networks that person may be on, like dating sites and things like that, and then social media accounts and things, addresses you can find for that person, et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's not something I've used, but it was interesting that it pops up as an ad that's just so easy to do.
Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's funny you say that because I've lived in many, many different homes, moving around a lot, and the internet has my addresses that I don't even remember the addresses for, like from 20 years ago.
No, exactly.
I think, how did they know I lived in that house?
Yeah.
I was a teenager. Really, I was. A question came in that says, it seems that the senior citizens can be a targeted group. Have you seen this in your work?
Oh, I think that's actually, it's something I was talking to my editor about lately. And, part of my concern with seniors is that if I had to predict who are going to be the biggest victims of data theft, of very meaningful data, I would say it's seniors and mentally disabled people. Because it's like, talk about two groups that will have a very hard time defending themselves and who have their social security numbers and other information all over the place. And so I think that that's a very, very big issue. That we're not even, like the credit cards were one issue and with the financial institutions and retailers, but I think that we're just on really at the beginning of this kind of data theft problems. Yeah.
It's an interesting comment you made about the seniors. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in technology back when key punching was around, long time ago. I carry a phone. It doesn't even have a camera.
A dumb phone, which is smarter than mine, yeah.
It's a phone, which means I can't be tracked nearly as easily as others. But I think the problem is, and I think it's more with young people, the younger generation isn't afraid to put anything and everything out on the internet. And I think privacy comes down to education. If you know what's out there and the information that you give, even going to the grocery store and using in Grand Rapids an M-Perks, Meijer knows what everybody buys, and they market to that. So I think it's more of an education and educating the consumer, which is everybody, as to what privacy is, how to protect your own privacy. And I think it's more the younger generation than the seniors, because again, they're putting everything out, they're twitting all over, and not thinking about what they're actually putting out there.
Well, I would sort of, because I believe it and because I like being devil's advocate, I would actually push back on a few things. One is that young people clearly value their privacy, which is why things like Snapchat took off and Facebook lost users or had a user decline, right? The thing is, then you learn that it's actually possible to hack Snapchat in a way that you can actually keep all of the things that are not supposed to be permanent. But I think the very fact that they took off is evidence, and I think technology will catch up with that among youth there is a consumer appetite for privacy. And so has it been fully explored and have sufficient technologies, particularly in mobile, come out for that appetite? Probably not yet, but it's there in some way. And so, I'm also, I'm not gonna lie, I get horrified at things I see anyone post, okay? We all have different feelings about when a family member dies, when you go through, posting up pictures of your newborn baby when they've just popped out. Everyone has different standards. So I don't think it's just young people that do, though I think that they clearly value privacy in certain respects. I would say that the other thing that what you're saying touches upon is the whole privacy versus convenience trade-off. And you must be familiar with it, and I just want to sort of broaden this out, right? What's there's a very clear value proposition from the sources that I cover in Silicon Valley that, objective reality shows is compelling to a lot of people, which is that the more I know about you, okay, the more I know about where you like to eat, what you ate when you dined, where you like to travel, the time of day that you like to go running, the trails you like to take, the more I know about your lifestyle, the more I can send you ads you actually want, right? That's the value proposition behind this stuff, is that there's convenience here. Instead of being glutted with spam, the algorithms and big data and artificial intelligence can get so smart that they can actually just put in front of your eyes the things you really want to see, all right? And there are technologists that's what they're working on. And so they say that we need to know more about you as a service to you to better be your personal assistant. And I don't think that proposal is dead. I think it's very alive for everyday people.
Do you think that people should have the right to be forgotten, or in other words, have their data erased from search engines and other sites permanently?
Oh, it's so complicated. I've really enjoyed covering Google's fight in Europe. It's been a lot of, it's very interesting because on the one hand, if you really believe in free speech and you think that the internet is this amazing tool to publish, it's the biggest publishing platform in history, right? It's a knowledge repository like we've never had before. And it lets, a person in a tiny local paper in Spain be known by the entire world. The great irony to me about his case, and I'm actually now for a moment forgetting his name, but the great irony about the case that spawns it all coming out of Spain is that now the name of this man who fell behind on payments for a home and then had a little article written about him is now all over the world. He's very well known. But on the flip side, it's interesting to me as a journalist, and I don't have a stand on the right to be forgotten. I'm watching it with interest how it litigates that in Europe. I'm also watching with interest in Europe the differences between different countries on this, right? Like the German stance versus the Spanish stance versus the British stance. Countries are very different on this stuff, and cultures are very different on this stuff. It's not just it's not just their economies in different ways. But one thing that I do notice and think about as a reporter is, when people agree to be interviewed, they don't always know what they're agreeing to, and they forget in the moment as amateurs. So, it's not your job to be professional sources, right? It's just we're people. It's easy to forget that, oh my God, this could live forever in this place that could be globally known and easily searchable. And so I do actually think that this issue of journalism living permanently online changes the relationship, or we're not done exploring how it changes the relationship between reporter and source.
Hi, kind of an open-ended question. You were discussing earlier about cyber stalking and cyberbullying kind of with the Reddit story and whatnot, and I instantly thought of 4chan. If you're familiar with that, and trolling and all this. So
yep, absolutely.
I was wondering what your take is
and
on
Monica Lewinsky very recently. Yeah,
exactly. So I was wondering what your take is on anonymity in this conversation of privacy and the internet and what we share and what do not share. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess just from observation, it works in different ways, and it just seems like the more anonymous you can be, the uglier you can be. Yeah. Right? It's interesting to me that Facebook has done, in my opinion, some of the most cutting-edge work in accountable communication online, digital communication. And so what I mean by that is that Facebook actually has a system to, if you're not who you say you are, they kick you off. They actually expect a real identity. You're not allowed to go on there with 5 different accounts and pretend to be different people. That's one. It's totally different from Twitter where you can have a gazillion handles. It's just a very different platform. And the other thing happening sort of behind the scenes, if you lift the curtain at Facebook, is they have this entire team that's dedicated to trying to help people resolve conflicts between each other through the platform. So inevitably what's going to happen, we're human. Whether we're talking to each other here or we're talking to each other this way, we're both still human, right? And then this way just brings out different parts of our personality. Maybe we're a bit less patient, a bit more knee-jerk, these kinds of things where you can just sort of go at things. We're less empathetic because we don't have eye contact. I can't see you smile. I can't see your body language. I can't see that you mean well for me, right? But something that Facebook's been working on with a very bizarre and interesting team of people that are expert in nonviolent conflict resolution. And so they've actually brought in people that have studied Gandhi to figure out how can we make Facebook a safe space. And it's in their business interest because they don't want people leaving Facebook, right? It needs to feel like a safe space to retain users. That's sort of why that kind of research is aligned with their bottom line. But what they've been finding, and they've been developing a system around, is basically conflict engagement. So that, okay, you put up a post that bothered me. Okay, maybe it bothered me because I just didn't look good in that picture, but I want it removed. So then I can send a note to Facebook saying, I want that picture removed. And okay, so if it's things like porn or things that violate the rules, then they can just, there's sort of a hard rule to get it off there. But if it's not so clear to them, you can be messaged, do you want to send a message to the person who posted it to ask about it? And so it's actually trying to, in this weird new digital world, it's trying to facilitate communication between parties, where part of the problem of digital life is that it's so one-dimensional. We get nothing except for that text or that image, right? And so Facebook has found, actually, that people are sending messages directly to each other when coaxed to and resolving problems amongst themselves voluntarily. Not all the time, but at least a sizable number of times. And so that kind of work online, to me, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit, a general profile about the data thieves in particular?
I wish. I mean, here's the thing, as I understand it, and it's actually a topic that I'll be delving into a lot more deeply over the next few months by spending a lot more time in underground sites, is there are, as it's been explained to me, and I don't feel like the greatest source on it yet because it's not something I've done my own investigative reporting on, and that's what it takes at this point to really know. But as my sources have explained to me, you've got people that are, that are just clowning around. We want to cause problems. We want to deface a website. We want to make people, we want to make big companies ashamed. We just want to cause shame, okay? Like there's this guy named Weave who was actually in federal prison, that's his handle, was in federal prison for a while and recently got released. Those people that are basically clowning around and saying, hey, this is my form of protest. I'm taking to the web to deface your site or to show that your security is stupid and that you're stupid, that kind of thing. You got people that are doing it for money. And some of this first group of people, as they get older, are like, oh, I've got this hacking skill and maybe I can make money from it. And so there's a sort of credit card thievery. And it doesn't, as I understand, it doesn't take that sophisticated a skill set because a lot of the credit card hacking in particular, you can actually go to underground sites and buy the malicious software, the malware packages that you would need to attack a target. So you don't yourself need to know how to construct the Trojans that you're using. You just purchase them and then deploy them. And so it's a pretty low-tech hacking skill set. Separately from that, you've got very organized criminal rings that, it's hard to pull off major hacks, and they're doing it. And then separately from that, I mean, this whole question of what is nation-state sponsored or related, I mean, it's a huge question mark. I was shocked when after the Sony hack, within days of that being public in December, the FBI publicly stated North Korea was involved. Now, the reason that shocked me is that there's not a single other investigation for a big data breach where the FBI so quickly came out to say, we know a nation state who was involved. And some critics of the government or some people that were watching this said, they're saying it's North Korea because there's no consequence to declaring that. If it had been China or Russia, there are consequences to saying that publicly, so you don't say it publicly. But as I understand it, the bigger concerns about nation-state organized hacking rings are from China and Russia. Russia more in terms of the cyber crime stuff and the financial stuff, and China more in terms of intellectual property theft.
The darknet drug markets that run on the Tor network, and I only learned about Tor because I watched House of Cards.
Oh, there we go.
And then I asked my kids, and they knew all about it.
Okay.
not for use, fortunately. But do you believe that that's enabled because of too much privacy? Or, I mean, if we give more privacy, do you think that that will help proliferate those deep, dark markets?
Oh, that's interesting. That question went in a direction I didn't expect. So just for a little bit of background for people that don't hang out in the deep web, one iconic case at this point is the case of the Dread Pirate Roberts. I'm not referring to Princess Bride, though that is where the name came from. But basically, there's this young man originally from Arizona, moved to Silicon Valley, and while he went there because he wanted community, he was bored alone in Arizona. He was helping to run and build this underground site called Silk Road, which is one of the sites that was known for traffic or for selling in a lot of licit and illicit materials. It wasn't just a drug marketplace. And then basically over time, he did things to slip up and reveal what his identity was. He wasn't, in the end, completely anonymous, but his identity came out through various mistakes that arguably he'd made. And then basically he was one day at a public library, I believe in the science fiction section in San Francisco, and federal agents, came SWAT team style and arrested him. It was just like the weirdest kind of, arrest at a public library. And so Silk Road, that site specifically, which is sort of known as being the place you go to get your LSD and your heroin, whatever, that site got temporarily shut down. But then what happened is, surprise, surprise, or no surprise whatsoever, other sites pop up. And to me, watching it, what's interesting about the illicit marketplaces is that the digital world is merely reflecting how we are in the physical world. We have underground marketplaces in the real world. They're arguably, much more violent. It takes, sort of guns and other things to basically regulate. But it's not a surprise that you would have these kinds of sites developing and that technology would be an extension of the way we think and the economies we create as human beings pre-digital life.
So you mentioned the Citizen4 movie about Edward Snowden, and I'm interested in what you think about the prison program, because I feel like it hasn't gotten enough press in the United States, and there's a lot of complicity, I think, between the corporations who are giving their data to the government and the government asking for them, and I feel like people should be more aware and potentially alarmed about that than they have been, so I'd like to hear what your take is on that.
Yeah, I feel lost as a citizen, right, and as a reporter. I mean, it is very hard to know what is happening behind the scenes, and whistleblowers aren't left and right there waiting to tell you, okay? So what have I noticed? What I've noticed is that you actually have companies in Silicon Valley like Yahoo suing so that they can publicly disclose what the government is asking of them, right? Because some of the stuff is under gag orders and FISA courts. And so one thing is that it's actually hard for us to know what level of collaboration is going on, but you've got the tech companies suing to be able to talk about it and disclose more, and it's actually in their business interest to disclose more. Again, I'll go back to this point, not just for what the American consumer, American public thinks, but because they're working so hard to get business abroad. So like, if I can give you one example, one huge sector that's grown is cloud storage. Okay, so everything's going on the cloud. What that means is just basically, you don't just save your Microsoft Office documents to a floppy drive or your hard drive. You want it to go live somewhere so that you can access it from anywhere, right? And so cloud storage is basically growing globally. It's super, super, super convenient. And you've got companies here that want to be the leader in cloud storage provider, like Amazon, Cisco, Google. You have all these companies that want to do that. It makes it very hard to get a contract with the oil companies of Saudi Arabia, or whatever hospital networks in India, if they believe that all of the data you're helping to secure is backdoor penetrable by the US government. And so I'm actually, because of the international aspects of it, my hunch is that a lot more of the leadership in Silicon Valley is angry about this. Because again, they're trying to grow abroad rapidly. That's where the growth is going to be. But I don't feel like I have particular insights into how much has really, tempered down. Mm-hmm.
But if they were so upset about it, why did they give it over? I mean, they could have said no. That's what bothers me about it. They could have just said, no, we won't give you all our data about all of our customers.
Right. Well, so it's probably the most helpful, for me, like the way that I think about things is to sort of think about case by case what's happening. And then what's hard about case by case is that we actually don't have information in front of us. And I'm not by any means saying that, like I don't feel like an apologist for the tech sector, and I'm by no means saying that they never wanted to, and they were, I think it's more like with all of the reputational fallout from the Snowden revelations, it can be that their internal governance has changed its position on this stuff, so that maybe they were actually more friendly before, and things have changed a bit because they felt all that public pressure.
Here's a public policy question for you. Do you ever run into conversation that talks about changing the policy rather than the technology? Can policy allow tech to grow and keep us safe? Or is it too slow to even try?
I studied public policy. I don't know. I mean, again, it depends on what you're talking about, right? Like there are plenty of technology conversations where the government is weighing in, and it's important that they weigh in. I think that, I mean, I'm just trying to get a handle on sort of or sort of dig into something specific here. I mean, I think that if you look at history, Congress just isn't passing bills. Okay, like Congress isn't doing much. So if you're waiting for Congress to act on things, whatever issue it is you're working on, right, doesn't matter what issue you're working on, you're probably going to wait for a very long time. And so I think that there's a separate issue about what moment are we in now, and can we get over the hyperpolarization that has been Washington, D.C. for, I think probably well over a decade. That's sort of one thing. But then in terms of, what I observe is that it's so important for policymakers, particularly with executive authority, to set standards or push industry to have conversations about setting standards when it comes to, example, or data security. So, it is actually with HIPAA, what was it, 2009, the HIPAA laws. I mean, the healthcare providers, because of federal law, are required to disclose when 500 or more records have been compromised of patients. Now, I don't think that health networks would be doing that on their own. I don't think they would just offer it up to us like, hey, because we care about accountability, here you go. Federal law is requiring them to do that. And so I have very little patience for the sources that I interview back in the tech sector in Silicon Valley that are like, government does nothing, government's stupid. I'm like, hey, there's this thing that moderately in some way can keep you accountable if it's aggressive enough about it. And so I think in those instances, it's very important.
I really enjoyed your talk and bringing up the little brother idea, but I wonder if there is a spot where kind of little brother and big brother overlap. I mean, you brought up the Islamophobia issue in the comment on CNN. Of course, we're not surprised that they would come out and say that. But, I mean, there's kind of an incentive, too, to circulate. I mean, there's incentive for the government to circulate this kind of Islamophobia idea. And you brought up the issue of the young man, the South Asian man who was, pinned as the terrorist. So, I mean, maybe my question is kind of malformed in this regard, but it seems like there is, I mean, kind of a space where they overlap when it comes to this issue of free speech, and when certain kind of politically unpopular, like, not Islamism per se, but kind of politically divisive topics like that are linked with like Islamophobia become. It seems like that kind of free speech get. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling on, but do you see what I'm getting at? That there's this point where they kind of overlap there, if that makes sense.
So I think I get what you're. Let me just try, and if not, then go again. Something that strikes me about digital communication is that for all of our amazing ability to talk to the entire world and sort of reach new places and corners of the earth and whatever, when you actually study the network formation, it's highly siloed. Okay, so for example, if you take any number of the police shootings that we've had in the last 2 years, and you look at Twitter feeds on them and how communication is happening around them and whatnot, you actually see sort of the pro-police camp tweeting to each other and forming their own networks and talking to each other and crowdfunding together and basically being in their own little world that is not exposed to the other camp that is tweeting to each other, hashtag Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera. You know, like what really strikes me is that in digital life, even though it's a platform for expression, it's actually quite easy to create and defend echo chambers. And you know, Pew actually did a study on this that I found very powerful about how do social media platforms promote more free speech. And what they found is that in polling people, that people actually post less, I believe, I'd have to double check, I think people post less to places like Twitter and Facebook when they find that their opinion is out of line with the majority think.
Yeah, that's. Thank you for sharpening my question here. That's what I was getting at. Is there this moment where, you know, because if there's incentive for kind of Big Brother to say, okay, we're going to use this information, but then, yeah, like you were saying, it's curbing what people are communicating about and the types of information that they would ostensibly be searching for on the internet.
Well, I mean, what you're getting at when you say Big Brother, I feel like part of what you're hinting at or wondering about is kind of like, do we have examples that either of us or other people here know of you know, like NSA amassed data that is then strategically unleashed for a propaganda campaign? That would be another kind of thing.
Propaganda campaign or targeting people who are researching or interested in kind of politically unpopular viewpoints.
Like they did, you know, sort of, it was done one way in the 60s and how is it being done now kind of thing. I don't have those examples or know. I mean, I would say by way of, and this is not, you know, this isn't exactly the same, but, you know, when you look at like organized quasi-state actors that are phenomenal at manipulating social media, I mean, ISIS really comes to mind, right? Like they know how to go viral. They know what to do with a beheading video, right? And so it's clear that more powerful organized forces and not just sort of little individuals on the ground know how to use this stuff, and that there are entire factories around it. Yeah.
You had said that much of our law enforcement had little to no knowledge of how to counter or prevent identity loss or hacking. How much defense is actually being provided by our government or third-party agencies?
There are so many barriers to local law enforcement in particular being a useful stop if you believe that you've been targeted through spyware or things like that. I mean, think about it from multiple perspectives. There's a cultural barrier, okay? If I've been you know, a beat cop, you know, for decades, and there's a way that I know how to approach investigation, and that way has nothing to do with examining this, I'm going to keep doing what I know, right? I'm just going to keep doing what I know. That's a matter of training. That's sort of one issue culturally across police departments, even in San Francisco. Like, one sergeant or captain was joking with me there that SFPD just got email starting in 2011. And so, SFPD. The other issue has to do with resources and training. A lot of how local police are going to up their capacity is by getting federal funding or basically inheriting toys from the federal government, right? And so you basically haven't had a full-fledged program where local police are incentivized to and funded to go ahead and learn how to do digital forensics, get the proper support to do it, and then know how to deal with this as a local crime. And then there's another issue which is jurisdictional, which is that a lot of these kinds of digital crimes can happen across state lines. Or the argument can be, this is across state lines. The person who was your offender is over in Jersey and I'm in New York. And so then once it crosses state lines, arguably it's interstate and then it's a federal matter. But like what federal, you know, like the federal FBI, they're not gonna like spend their resources going investigating garden variety stuff at the local level. And so there's that sort of huge gap. And so it's very messy. I think that stuff is very messy.
Is there a solution? Do you see anything moving in the direction of being able to make it easier for people to have?
I don't know so much about the solutions there. I mean, what I keep hearing more about the problems, and then these individual pilot stuff. Like I hear about individual precincts or sort of like, the individual kind of really motivated, law enforcement person wanting to go ahead and learn something. But like, in canvassing the country and looking for that kind of expertise, I think it's really just been one-offs.
What do you think about the government's stance on tech sector's growing use or planned use of high-level encryption in phones or email that make their surveillance and technology more difficult?
This is it is, talk about the public and private sector coming to a head here. There was this really fascinating exchange between Yahoo and the NSA in Washington, D.C. recently. This is what's happening, it is possible, so encrypting our data so that it's scrambled up and it's, you basically need to unlock it to read it and stuff. That can happen, it can be encrypted when it's just sitting on your phone. That can happen when it's in transit between your phone over to a server, and that can happen at the server. It can be encrypted the entire time. And it's actually becoming cheaper and easier to do that level of encryption so that at no point are you actually exposed so that like a robber can come at that part of the food chain where it's exposed and grab it. It's actually becoming easier to do technologically. But what's happening now is that some companies in Silicon Valley, like Yahoo, who has a very activist security officer there now, which is, I think we're going to hear more and more about Yahoo because he's quite an activist over there. Companies like that are saying, okay, well, we should just encrypt stuff, hardcore, in transit, at rest. And the NSA has spoken disfavorably about that and said, if you start doing that, you're going to get in our way when we're looking for criminals. Like, you've got to keep some channels open for us and some holes open for us, because if you do your security job too well, you're going to up the cost of our investigations job. Now, this argument, this debate fascinates me. And so, like, how is it going to go? I think that that's probably one of the most important, by way of, iconic tone setting for how we move forward. I think that argument happening right now between the government and the companies about encryption and how much encryption is the right level, it's something that we need to like watch and report on like crazy. Yeah.
But isn't the encryption how Edward Snowden was able to transmit all of his documents so effectively?
So
like 3 layers of encryption and the wildest that he created, or
right. So Snowden was going to figure out a way to do it. Yeah. And if you watch Citizen 4, you'll see. But this argument about do you leave holes for us? I think that arguably it's just been so easy to steal data for so long that the people who knew how to do it are getting irritated that anyone else is catching on. So.
We have a texter that wrote, I've seen how HIPAA has significantly increased privacy in the healthcare industry. Do you see this type of progress in any other industries?
So industries are working on it, right? So HIPAA set requirements that actually, arguably there's what HIPAA says and then there's the enforcement. And so there are actually arguably some very big gaps there. And the Blue Cross and Premera hacks are really illustrative of that. But yeah, there's not legislation right now that's requiring, for example, retailers to get their acts together. But it's more pressure, if you can call it that, industry pressure for them to do that, and then new technologies coming out. So for example, like last year, the fact is just about everyone themselves had their credit card stolen or know someone who did. It was just like rampant, like it's left and right. And a lot of those hacks were happening for the same reason over and over and over again. So the Target breach happened, and over a year later, just about every single retailer was still vulnerable to the exact same kind of attack that got Target, which is called a point-of-sale attack. And so what's happened is that the retail industry has said, hey, it's not reasonable to expect every mom and pop store in America and then the larger retailers to change all of their hardware and get more secure devices and use pin and chip like they do in Europe and chip and pin like they do in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. What's more reasonable is change the payment technologies, right? And so what's interesting is actually now you're seeing things like Apple Pay come out. Not everyone is using Apple Pay, but it's basically a way to like tap and pay on your phone if you have an iPhone, a new iPhone. And then what Apple does is that they never give your credit card number to the retailer where you're purchasing. They give you a one-time use token, and then that token gets translated back to a financial institution to basically use your account. But the retailer never knows your credit card number and actually never even knows your name. So it's actually a privacy enhancing to the level of, now if you go to a store and swipe your card, they see your name. You can get to the point that they don't even know who you are, and that's a huge privacy protection. So those kinds of technologies, rather than legislation forcing investment in certain kinds of security, might be the way that these problems get solved.
Do you see any possibility of legitimate oversight and enforcement of rules and regulations on a global basis? I mean, that's global. And since anyone can do basically anything without repercussions globally.
I mean, that's what Obama said in December in his last speech of the year. He was like, he dedicated his entire, final speech of the year to this issue of cybersecurity. And that's why he weighed in heavily on the Sony hack. He even said the CEO of Sony should have called him personally to talk about it. I was like, whoa, like the US president saying that some CEO should call him on his BlackBerry to talk about. I was like, it was wild to me as a reporter to watch how vehement and outspoken Obama was at that point. And he said, we're going to have to proceed as a global community on this stuff. And what that probably means is, China, you really got to get it together with us, right? But I mean, it seems like the big fight, what happened last year as well is you actually saw the Justice Department start a case against a Chinese organized hacker group, specifically for stealing intellectual property from a bunch of firms, manufacturing companies, I believe in the Western District of Pennsylvania. So you're seeing a bit of this bring it to court, because the US wasn't even bringing this stuff to court because they were afraid of diplomacy and international relations. And so now this next question of, will they be able to go from, will the US be able to go from showing its citizens, no, really, we are going to stand up for your IP theft. Really, we're going to make us think about it. We're going to make this a priority, because the government was very reluctant to do that earlier. Are they going to go from that to forcing this kind of issue on the global agenda the way that they might, other kinds of issue? I mean, I don't know yet, but I mean, Obama said he was going to make it a priority.
Well, we have several college students in here, and one of them asked, are there concerns regarding information during the college application process, particularly financial aid in the FAFSA application and all the information you give out during that process?
Yes.
We'll leave it at that. Okay, one last question. We know you are working on a piece today. Is there anything you can share that's cutting edge that maybe we can get a little tidbit of before you actually produce it?
Oh, it's already on air. It already aired.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
So, I mean, I can share with you what others have heard already. I reported a story today about how there's about 2 billion people on Earth who have a decent connection on their smartphone, and 5 billion people are mostly or entirely offline. And so Google and Facebook, two companies I report on regularly, are on very public vocal campaigns to connect the rest of the world. And part of what's interesting to me about it is that when you talk to the leaders of these companies, they talk about it like it's a big humanitarian project. Like we know, for example, Bill Gates leaving his CEO position to go and head up this global relief effort in public health. And so I kind of feel like the people of these companies are talking about internet connection the way that Gates might talk about vaccinations. But to be fair, the World Bank has described connectivity as core for development for the entire world. I mean, you can't be a participant in the modern economy. You can't create businesses without having a basic connection. So it is different from Coca-Cola. But these companies talk about it like it's a big development project, but actually it's a huge business opportunity. And so the story was basically looking at some of the technology that Google specifically is developing with hot air balloons that sprinkle the internet in the tropics, and why it's good for both companies' bottom lines. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice. Who's guilty of checking in tonight? Who's guilty of checking in on Facebook? And who's guilty of downloading the app Glo? Another round of applause to Arthi Shahani. Thank you very much for a great evening. This does bring us to the end of our 2015 Great Decisions discussion series. We want to let you know of two events that are upcoming. Again, a year-long activity that this organization that many activities throughout the year. April 28th, the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, David Shedd, joins us for a global perspective from a U.S. Defense Intelligence Director. And on May 13th, the famous or infamous World Quest, the game of international trivia. Study up on your international flags, maybe, maybe not. Both events are on the website at worldmichigan.org. Another thank you to you for coming and presenting tonight. Drive safely home, and we'll see you at the next event. Thank you.